the Abbé Tourteau, Vicar General of Agde, Abbé of Grand Champ, Order of Citeaux, Diocese of Chartres. When the bishop succeeded to this apartment, after the hospital patients, he had found these portraits there, and had left them. They were priests, and probably donors, 2 reasons for respecting them. All that he knew about these 2 persons was, that they had been appointed by the king, the one to his bishopric, the other to his benefice, on the same day, the 27th of April 1785. Madame Magloire having taken the pictures down to dust, the bishop had discovered these particulars written in whitish ink on a little square of paper, yellowed by time, and attached to the back of the portrait of the Abbé of Grand Champ with 4 wafers. At his window he had an antique curtain of a coarse woolen stuff, which finally became so old, that, in order to avoid the expense of a new one, Madame Magloire was forced to take a large seam in the very middle of it. This seam took the form of a cross. The bishop often called attention to it. "How delightful that is," he said.
All the rooms in the house, without exception, those on the ground floor as well as those on the first floor, were whitewashed, which is a fashion in barracks and hospitals. However, in their latter years, Madame Magloire discovered beneath the paper which had been washed over, paintings, ornamenting the apartment of Mademoiselle Baptistine, as we shall see further on. Before becoming a hospital, this house had been the ancient parliament house of the bourgeois. Hence this decoration. The chambers were paved in red bricks, which were washed every week, with straw mats in front of all the beds. Altogether, this dwelling, which was attended to by the 2 women, was exquisitely clean from top to bottom. This was the sole luxury which the bishop permitted. He said, "That takes nothing from the poor."
It must be confessed, however, that he still retained from his former possessions 6 silver knives and forks and a soup ladle, which Madame Magloire contemplated every day with delight, as they glistened splendidly upon the coarse linen cloth. And since we are now painting the Bishop of D, as he was in reality, we must add that he had said more than once, "I find it difficult to renounce eating from silver dishes." To this silverware must be added 2 large candlesticks of massive silver, which he had inherited from a great-aunt. These candlesticks held 2 wax candles, and usually figured on the bishop's chimney-piece. When he had any one to dinner, Madame Magloire lighted the 2 candles and set the candlesticks on the table. In the bishop's own chamber, at the head of his bed, there was a small cupboard, in which Madame Magloire locked up the 6 silver knives and forks and the big spoon every night. But it is necessary to add, that the key was never removed.
The garden, which had been rather spoiled by the ugly buildings which we have mentioned, was composed of 4 alleys in cross form, radiating from a tank. Another walk made the circuit of the garden, and skirted the white wall which enclosed it. These alleys left behind them 4 square plots rimmed with box. In 3 of these, Madame Magloire cultivated vegetables. In the 4th, the bishop had planted some flowers. Here and there stood a few fruit trees. Madame Magloire had once remarked, with a sort of gentle malice, "Monseigneur, you who turn everything to account, have, nevertheless, one useless plot. It would be better to grow salads there than bouquets." "Madame Magloire," retorted the bishop, "you are mistaken. The beautiful is as useful as the useful." He added after a pause, "More so, perhaps."
This plot, consisting of 3 or 4 beds, occupied the bishop almost as much as did his books. He liked to pass an hour or 2 there, trimming, hoeing, and making holes here and there in the earth, into which he dropped seeds. He was not as hostile to insects as a gardener could have wished to see him. Moreover, he made no pretensions to botany, he ignored groups and consistency, he made not the slightest effort to decide between Tournefort and the natural method, he took part neither with the buds against the cotyledons, nor with Jussieu against Linnaeus. He did not study plants, he loved flowers. He respected learned men greatly, he respected the ignorant still more, and, without ever failing in these 2 respects, he watered his flower beds every summer evening with a tin watering pot painted green.
The house had not a single door which could be locked. The door of the dining room, which, as we have said, opened directly on the cathedral square, had formerly been ornamented with locks and bolts like the door of a prison. The bishop had had all this ironwork removed, and this door was never fastened, either by night or by day, with anything except the latch. All that the first passerby had to do at any hour, was to give it a push. At first, the two women had been very much tried by this door, which was never fastened, but Monsieur de D had said to them, "Have bolts put on your rooms, if that will please you." They had ended by sharing his confidence, or by at least acting as though they shared it. Madame Magloire alone had frights from time to time. As for the bishop, his thought can be found explained, or at least indicated, in the 3 lines which he wrote on the margin of a Bible. This is the shade of difference: the door of the physician should never be shut, the door of the priest should always be open.
On another book, entitled Philosophy of the Medical Science, he had written this other note: Am not I a physician like them? I also have my patients, and then, too, I have some whom I call my unfortunates. Again he wrote, Do not inquire the name of him who asks a shelter of you. The very man who is embarrassed by his name is the one who needs shelter. It chanced that a worthy cure, I know not whether it was the cure of Colubru or the cure of Pompiri, took it into his head to ask him one day, probably at the instigation of Madame Magloire, whether Monsieur was sure that he was not committing an indiscretion, to a certain extent, in leaving his door unfastened day and night, at the mercy of any one who should choose to enter, and whether, in short, he did not fear lest some misfortune might occur in a house so little guarded. The bishop touched his shoulder, with gentle gravity, and said to him, Nisi Dominus custodiret domum, in vanum vigilantque custodianem, unless the Lord guard the house, in vain do they watch who guard it. Then he spoke of something else. He was fond of saying, there is a bravery of the priest as well as the bravery of a colonel of dragoons, only, he added, ours must be tranquil.